Today, I'm joined by Jake Crain of Crain and Company. And Jake, we've interacted a little bit on High Top Game Day on Saturdays, and I've always enjoyed your work a ton. So, wanted to get you on here. Thank you
For
for
sure.
joining me. How are you doing?
Matt, I'm doing great. Love your work as well. It's always fun when we go on High Top and chop it up. And no, it's an honor to be on. I think you do an incredible job.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, I want to talk to you about Graham Mertz.
hmm
So, this offseason, there was a ton of talk about how Florida kind of missed out on bigger names in the portal. And there were other guys they should have landed. Maybe Florida moved too slow on them. They had that very meticulous evaluation process that Napier likes to go through. Nothing's particularly fast. But how do you think his eval looks at this point in the season now?
Well, I mean, it looks like gold now. I mean, I don't think you'd be crazy, and any Florida fan out there listening, I don't think they think it's crazy to look at Graham Mertz, not only from his body of work at Wisconsin, but kind of his makeup as a player, and then you look at who Billy Napier's had in his past. Running that spread pistol, having a quarterback that can do multiple things, which obviously manipulates defenders' eyes and kind of creates, your matchups for you. A lot of people were scratching their head, including me. I mean, I had watched Graham at Wisconsin, and it looked like, they were protecting him, but when you watch him, his arm didn't really jump out. His athleticism really didn't jump out. So when he made the move to Florida with the fit in this system, in this league, I, like everybody else, was skeptical of it. But, before the year, we talked a lot about, being patient with Billy Napier and letting him actually build it. And at a place like Florida, it's hard to preach patience, right? Because, you've won a ton. It's a huge brand. It's a place that's known for football. I recruited the state for a long time. There's talent from up and down. The kids get faster the more south you go in Florida, too. It's crazy. But it was, preaching patience. Like, let this man build it the right way. Because I'm going to be honest with you, Allie, I think one thing that people didn't talk about enough with Dan Mullen leaving was, Florida recruits itself. You have some players that can do some things. The depth wasn't great, but the culture was a big problem. And that's a cliche word that's thrown around a lot. But when you looked, it was a soap opera on the sidelines between Grantham and Mullen. It seemed like everything wasn't about the players. And that takes time to build that. That takes years. That takes cycle of leaders teaching other guys how to lead when the young, talented guys come in. So, to make a short story long, yeah, his eval's looking great on Graham Mertz. But I'll be honest with you, I think if you sat down with Billy right now and he knew it was between you and him, he'd be like, yeah, I'm a little surprised.
Well, I mean, we were all a little surprised, but so you're watching Mertz week in and week out. We know the things that he's done well. What are some things you think he could do better on?
Well, I think a little bit of the anticipatory throwing from him could get better. When you look at some of the big plays that Florida have made, he's actually been late on a couple throws. But outside of that, I mean, Allie, to be honest with you, the run game's been kind of hit or miss, right? I mean, you even go back to the Utah game at the beginning of the year when I thought they were going a little too much east and west in the run game. But it was basically Graham Mertz out there having to carry the offense with, two other guys with Pearsall and name that guy this weekend. But I think from an anticipatory throwing standpoint, he could be a little bit better. But to be honest, I think he's played at about as high of a level. And when you look at the numbers, it backs it up. I mean, he's not running for the yards that Jordan Travis is, but from a decision-making standpoint, pre-snap, checking to the right play, understanding that the pressures he's getting, I think he's been about as good as you can ask.
What are your thoughts on Florida's offense in general? I mean, on Saturday, we saw a different Florida team, I think, than we have seen previously, at least offensively. But what are your thoughts when you look at the season so far?
Well, I think when you look at the matchups, I think you can make a pretty good case that, South Carolina's not great up front. Florida tends to have more success against teams that aren't great up front. Outside of really the Tennessee game, in my opinion, that's especially when that defensive front seven, I know you asked me about offense, I thought they played way above board in that game. I thought they punched way above your weight. But offensively, I think this is an offense that has a couple playmakers that has to pitch backwards at times. What do I mean by that? Throwing on early downs, play action. How do you get that? You get that with a good run game. But I do think their season changed a little bit when they started going more north and south in the run game as opposed to east and west. It wasn't as much lateral as it was vertical. And when you get that, you're able to chew up yards more. Yeah, you kind of get that zone push where you're stretching it out and it cuts back anywhere. But it seems like that offensive line, even with Kingsley out, is more comfortable with the base block and the gap scheme block and getting north and south. So I think it's an offense that utilizes the weapons that it has. It doesn't have a ton of them, but they've been able to air it out a little bit more than than what I thought they'd be able to with this whole wide receiver core that's returning. Because we all know Pearsall's a dog, but they've Eugene Wilson, some of these other guys have stepped up to make plays. So it's not the sexiest offense that Billy's going to have. Once that quarterback running element gets back into play, that's when it starts getting, hey, why are we scoring 48 points a game? Like, why is it just going bananas? Which that guy's coming, believe me.
That guy is coming, but I actually think Gator fans are kind of a little bit relieved to think that like Graham Mertz has done a good enough job that Graham Mertz can do this job next year, and then we don't have to play that next guy that's coming, DJ Lagway, as a true freshman with that insane 2024 schedule.
No, without a doubt. Look, redshirting is a lost art. Redshirting is the best thing that ever happened to me a lot of times. And nowadays, I mean, even the NFL, nobody gets time. The last quarterback I think that's ever going to get time to sit back behind a guy is Jordan Love with the Packers. It seems like if you go early nowadays, they throw you right into the fire. Yeah, but I think you'd be crazy if Graham Mertz finishes the year. And I do caution fans, Florida fans, you should be excited right now with how the year is going, without a doubt. But it is a marathon, not a sprint. See how the year finishes, right? You don't want to put the cart before the horse. The schedule's it's not a walk in the park at any stretch of the imagination for Florida at any point in the schedule this year or next year. But there's some tough games coming down the stretch. But without a doubt, perfect scenario. Graham Mertz, another year in the system, another year to build chemistry, a true off season, going through winter workouts, going through a full spring practice, going through a summer workout, going through those meetings, doing that team chemistry building, and then letting Lagway see it a year, right? Because there's so much that goes into a freshman, especially at the quarterback position. It's one of the hardest spots to play in general, let alone as a young guy. You're going to college, you're going to class, you're getting used to that new lifestyle, and you're going to be playing in the SEC that's adding Texas and Oklahoma. So you want a little more time to marinate in it. It's kind of how we say it on the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, the speed going from high school to college is insane, but going from high school to the SEC, the SEC on steroids now that it will be in 2024 is a huge ask.
Yeah.
You alluded earlier to the fact that many people have preached patience to Florida fans, and we are kind of in a what have you done for me lately era in college football. Fans aren't patient. You look at what even happened the first couple of weeks in Colorado and just, LSU, different places. They want Billy to win now. How far along do you think Napier is in his rebuild and what his plan to win?
Yeah, I think he's right on schedule. Again, the standard, and I say this about a lot of places, especially in the SEC, the standard, losing should never be accepted, right? The standard should never falter, but reality should always be accepted. And even at a place like Florida, and we've seen this at all the big places, right? Football is cyclical. It will always be cyclical. And when you have a situation, and look, I think Dan Mullen is a good football coach, but it went sour badly at the end. And a lot of it, football is the truest team sport in the sense that you play like you prepare, and culture and that locker room matters as much as anything that's going to happen on the field. Those two things go hand in hand, and that is not an overnight switch. That's what I think made what Colorado did so impressive. That was the most impressive thing of all of it, was being able to get those guys to play together and not have 15 penalties a game and have some cohesion and have that locker room together. So I think Billy building it the right way. If I want to build a house that's going to last for 15, 30 years, however long, a house lasts. I know coaches and houses typically don't last as long as each other, but I want to make sure if I'm going to get anything right, it's going to be that foundation. Because if I can get that foundation right, I can change the paint, right? I can get the roof redone. I can put in new windows. Like I tell my wife, we'll redo the bathroom every 4 or 5 years if you want to. But if that foundation isn't right, then you're not going to be able to do any of that other stuff. And you got to get through the choppy water to get through the smooth. I just think the water hadn't been nearly as choppy as what they thought this year going into it, which is always great. So I think he's right on schedule, maybe even a little bit of ahead of schedule. But this game's won and lost up front. So when you're looking at recruiting, it's on the edge, right? Guys that can protect the passer and guys that can rush the passer. Because when Florida's cooking and when anybody's cooking, it's because they're good up front and the rest falls into place. I mean, hell, it's Florida. You're going to have skill players.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. You can look around and find them all over the state. Okay, so Vegas had UF at 5.5 wins this year. They currently have 5. So 5 games left. I'm going to play a quick game. I'm going to tell you week by week opponent, and you tell me what UF's chances of winning are and why.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
I'm just glad if you're going to say let's play a game, you're not coming in on a tricycle with a clown mask on.
No,
That's
no
I'd much
costume
rather do
on
this
it. This
one.
isn't
Yeah.
high top. I didn't
Yeah.
dress up for you. Okay.
I don't want to saw off my arm and decide if y'all are beating, Missouri on the road or anything.
No, don't worry. Okay. So bye week this week. Next week, we go into Jacksonville. We play two-time reigning national champs, Georgia Bulldogs. What's Florida's chances?
Well, I would put it with Brock Bowers being out. I would put it at about 40%. I think that's about right. And that's with Florida playing clean. Again, Georgia hasn't been without Brock Bowers, and Georgia isn't Michigan, right? Michigan has very talented players. Georgia has very talented players, but Michigan has experience, a ton of experience they brought back. Georgia has experience at spots, but they're winning while developing.
Yeah.
And when you lose that guy on the field, that security blanket for Carson Beck, you look at the cord, pull if there's an emergency. Brock Bowers was that pull if there's an emergency cord. Now, getting Ladd McConkey back is huge, and Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett have to step up. But I think now you cut off one of the heads of the Hydra of Georgia, which obviously is going to increase Florida's chances to win.
All right. So after that, they head home to the Swamp. They take on Arkansas. What are their odds there?
I put it at 70%. Arkansas, I feel like, they lose to Bama, tough fought game. The Sam Pittman train, it seems to be kind of souring, which is like the weirdest marriage that didn't work out ever. It's like, going over to your friends and their parents always get along. They like the same things. And then all of a sudden they're getting divorced because the dad was running around with the French teacher. It's just weird. Not saying Sam Pittman's running around with a French teacher, but y'all know what I mean.
No,
I just feel like Arkansas.
So if they could get fired, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, it seems like they're always trying to find something with cause nowadays. But when I look at Arkansas, they're a one-trick pony, and it's a hell of a trick with KJ Jefferson.
Yeah.
I feel like Florida's more consistent, and it's at home.
Yeah, at home helps for sure. Okay, so then after that, they head to LSU, Tiger Stadium, probably at night, Death Valley, craziest place to play in college football, in my humble opinion. Anyway, what are their odds there?
I would put it at 30%. I think LSU has the best offense in the country right now, especially after, I said this last week before USC lost to Notre Dame, and people stared at me like I had an arm growing out of my head. Just because I think LSU's better up front. I don't think you stop LSU. I think you try and hold them to field goals. That's about the only way. Now, I know LSU's defense has been porous, but this is an LSU team that, you really don't want to get in a track meet with either, because they're one of the most explosive, if not the most explosive offense in the country.
All right. After that, they head to Missouri. It's late November game. It'll probably be cold. It'll probably be early. What are their odds there?
I would say give me 40%. I'm high on this Missouri team. I do think Graham will have a lot of success through the air. The pass defense for Missouri has been a problem. I will say Florida's has been a little bit Jekyll and Hyde on the road. That's what made that South Carolina performance so important, because it was a good effort on the road. You were able to find a way to win, find a way to put points on the board, because it's been hit or miss, like most teams are in big games at home or away. But it seems that Missouri right now, with Brady Cook, and one of the best signs for Missouri is that they were able to beat Kentucky on the road with Luther Burden having like 30 yards. So they've got multiple weapons, good running game with Schrader and Peace, and then you got Weiss Jr. on the outside. I just like this Missouri team, and I think they found something with Brady Cook too.
All right, last game, they head home to the Swamp. They take on Florida State right after Thanksgiving. What are their odds?
Some people will probably be surprised by this. I put it at 50%. Listen, I'm from Auburn, Alabama. If anybody understands rivalry games, it's me, especially when you play them at home. Weird things happen in the Swamp. I think Florida's good enough up front to stay in the fight a while with Florida State. The biggest question is, can you keep Keon Coleman and that giraffe Johnny Wilson on roller skates out there away from making the big one-on-one plays enough to keep yourself in it? I think they can. It's a rivalry game. Especially, if they finish the season strong going in that game, there's going to be a ton of momentum. It's going to be a huge recruiting weekend. So, put it at half and half. It's a rivalry game, man. Strap it up. Let's go.
All right. So that basically means you think worst case Florida sitting at 6-6, best case Florida sitting at 7-5. You think that seems About accurate?
Yeah, which would be, I mean, you ask Vegas. I mean, they had it at 5,
Yeah.
and kind of the way it looked with Graham Mertz coming over, and including myself. I mean, I undervalued Florida in this one a lot. I undervalued South Carolina. I should have flipped them. I undervalued Florida, a little bit more than South Carolina, but no, I mean, I think it'll give them some positive momentum in recruiting. And again, Florida's one of those places, and all it takes is a spark and a wildfire starts.
This has been so fun. Thank you for joining us. Tell everybody, Jake, where they can
Yeah.
find you on social media, listen to you, check out your work.
Well, Al, this is great. We need to get you on the show for sure. No, it's easiest way to find us if you listen to your podcasts or shows. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that stuff. It's Crain and Company, Crain Company. We're on YouTube as well. We're the sports show for the Daily Wire. We go live each weekday morning, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern, 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central. Those are the only 2 time zones I know. So if you live in another one, I'm sure you can figure it out. We take live calls. We have a live chat, but if you can't catch us live, it stays on there forever. But yeah, this is fun. I'm excited for you guys. A good Florida. I feel like Cam Brady off the campaign. A good Florida is good for college football. They're this nation's backbone.
I could not agree more. Thanks for joining me. Have a good weekend, and hopefully the Gators are able to pull one out.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, I'm excited. It's another weekend. Football season needs to slow down a little bit though.